Hello and welcome to Kankakee Podcast, where we talk about the people and places of Kankakee County. I'm Jake Lamore, and this is our monthly episode where we team up with the Kankakee County Museum to do something historical about the county's past. And we are joined once again by Jack Klasey and Jorie Walters.
Hello.
Hello to you both.
Good afternoon.
It's been a while since all of us have been in the same room.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm super excited about that because having the two of you together, it's like there's nothing that we can't do in history of the Kankakee area. So thank you both so much for coming back to do this.
Oh, we love doing this.
Our pleasure to be here.
So before we get deep into that, I just want to highlight a couple events that are coming up. This episode isn't dropping until I believe the first part of August. So unfortunately, the local authors signing meet and greet will probably already have taken place. But I know, Jack, you are going to be a part of that on July 22nd, but also on August 19th. That's an event people can have the opportunity to see you as well, right? The book club. Are you going to be there for that?
I don't plan to be, but I might. I know they're doing the discussion of my book called
The Ferris book.
The Ferris book, right.
Yes. Okay. That must have been why I thought you would be there. So it's just on your
right,
book about
book
George
club
Ferris.
Discussion of the book.
Okay. And there's a specific episode of Kankakee Podcast just with Jack Klasey we talk about that book a little bit, the
That's
George
correct.
Ferris
Right.
book. You can buy that at the museum. But anyway, that adult book club is coming up August 19th at the Kankakee County Museum. And then August 27th is the biannual Voices of the Past Cemetery Walk.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
And that's always at Mound Grove.
Yes.
And so that is always an exciting event, too, to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to get more information, go to KankakeeCountyMuseum.com. Obviously, Facebook and Instagram, Kankakee County Museum. You can always call the museum or shoot them an email as well. But is there anything that you guys want to add to those events or any other events that you know of that are going on at the museum?
No, I think that.
No. And just to remind you that there's two campuses, the French Heritage Museum and then the Kankakee County Museum as well. So today we are talking about Bird Park, right in the heart of Kankakee.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we start with Bird Park?
One thing I might say about Bird Park is, do you call it Bird Park or Birds Park?
Oh, yeah.
You find a lot of people in town who will call it Birds Park as if it, a park belonging to the birds.
Well, it may as well belong to the geese hang out there a lot, right?
Geese and ducks and things.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
But actually, the name of the park is Worth W. Bird Park. And Worth Bird, who was the man who did the quarry that became Bird Park. But I'm jumping ahead. I just wanted to touch on the bird versus birds.
Yeah.
You hear birds quite a bit.
Well, and you just assume it's called Bird Park because there's always birds hanging out there. So people thought, well, let's just call it Bird Park. But it's actually legitimately the name of the guy that it's named after. His name was Bird. So
Correct.
I think when I was growing up, we always went there, my dad and my siblings, and we always called it Birds Park.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I've always called it Bird. I've never heard anyone else call it Birds, but it's probably a generational thing. I don't know. But
I will say when we have photographs at the museum when it was a quarry, and of course pictures when it was a swimming beach. We'll talk about that too. But its life began as a quarry, and back in the day, stone quarries were all the rage. A lot of businesses in the area, in town, and in the surrounding towns of quarries. So it started life as a quarry.
Limestone in particular, correct?
Right.
And we have photographs of the whole area. And there's a kind of a stone, I think it was a kiln on
Lime
Station Street that you can kind of see a little bit of what in the world is that? Well, that was part of the
And the lime kiln actually was where they heated limestone to a high temperature and broke it down into lime, which was used as an ingredient for cement and for construction work.
So a kiln is essentially almost like a stove,
It's an
kind
oven.
of
Like
an
a-
oven.
Big oven sort of
Okay.
thing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what do we know about Bird then?
Okay, well, go ahead, Jorie.
We know that his family is one of the first people in Kankakee before Kankakee.
Yeah, I think they came here in 1851.
Mhm.
Oh, so right before it was incorporated.
Mhm.
Right. Mhm.
And he was one of several children, and he just became a businessman and decided to wanted to develop a quarry. And eventually he ran it for a long time, and then eventually he sold it and then retired. And then the quarry went on for a little while longer, and then I'll let you take it from here.
Actually, the Bird family settled in 1851 and bought the property where the quarry is now on the west side of the river. They bought it from a man named Uncle Jimmy Lamb,
Mhm.
and Uncle Jimmy was kind of unique. He owned the property. This was before there were any bridges across the river, so Uncle Jimmy was a ferryman.
Mhm.
He had a ferry boat. He had a wooden scow of some sort, and he had stretched a long, heavy rope across the Kankakee River, and the boatman would pull with a hook type of thing along the along the rope to move the ferry from one side to the other.
You see those in movies, I feel
Yes.
like. You see the movies from the 1800s where
Right.
they depict that, where it's kind of like a barge, and
Right.
they move the barge by the guy
Right.
pulling the rope.
That's right.
That's great.
But yes, Worth Bird farmed for a time, but then in about 1872, he went into the quarrying business and started digging the big hole in the ground north of Station Street.
And I assume, and you guys can tell me different, that the limestone quarry business was really good at that time, or about to be good, actually. He probably bought it right before all that building
Mhm.
started happening in Kankakee, right? It was
Right.
like, oh, they're about to incorporate this
Mhm.
town, this county. I better get in there, buy a quarry, and that way they have to buy their building material from me, right? Was that the idea?
Yeah, although he opened his quarry in the 1870s, and by then the town had been around for about 20 years.
Oh,
but there's
so it was
still
late.
an awful lot of building going on,
Mhm.
and there was also the lime business. The earliest quarry, I think, is probably what is now Alpiner Park, and I don't know what the name of it was, but stone cut at that quarry was used to build a number of the downtown buildings, First
Mhm.
Baptist Church, for example, and quite a few of the older buildings downtown where you see the marvelous limestone structures.
How long did they operate the quarry there?
Let's see.
It was about at least 20 years.
Yeah,
about
quite a
to-
few. Yeah, because they were, let's see.
1926 is when it was over to the
Yeah.
Park District.
Uh-huh.
But
It's in
before
1925.
that,
Yeah.
Mhm. 25. So he retired before that, and
And
but I had kept going with under a
I
different
think he
name.
leased the quarry to,
Mhm.
I haven't got the name at hand here right now,
Oh.
but he leased the quarry for a number of years to
Mhm.
someone, and after they decided that to let them give up the lease, and he donated the property to the newly formed Kankakee Park Board.
Did the quarry run out of limestone at any point, or it was just like, we're not doing this anymore? Was there no demand for
I
it?
think the building materials
Mhm.
kind of revolution kind of traded up to different materials needed for building. Cement came in, at later times. Kind of like the horse and buggy to the trolley to the vehicle.
Yeah.
Kind of phased out the older. And,
So
there
there
was less demand.
there wasn't a
demand.
big demand for limestone
Right.
anymore. Okay.
yeah, buildings were made of a little bit different materials,
Mhm.
easier to work with, and probably less expensive. Less.
Yeah.
Another question, and I'm not sure that I've never seen an actual determination of this, but it may have been caused by striking a spring and the flooding of the quarry, because generally speaking, if there was water, if they did strike water, they would pump it out and so forth. But sometimes it just reached the point where they say, okay, let's just go ahead and let it flood.
They didn't want to pump it out anymore, probably.
Yeah, right. So
Okay.
that may well be because it certainly was flooded by the time that Worth Bird
Yeah.
deeded it over to the city.
And
over to
wouldn't
Park
they?
District.
He would probably be pumping that water right into the river, right?
Right. Mhm.
And maybe that was not
Not a.
something they were like, yeah, we're not
Good
going to
idea.
let you do that,
Yeah.
maybe, kind of thing. So Bird passes it off and donates all that property to what would eventually become the Kankakee Valley Park District.
Right. It's
And that
about
was in
30 acres.
And it was in the 1920s? Or it was-
1926.
And before that, though, were people using it as a swimming hole, or did that not come until the passing over?
About 1928 to
28,
about
yeah.
31. And we have great pictures of that. too.
Yes, I've seen so
Of the
many great
swimming pool.
pictures of
Swimming
people
area.
swimming.
And then the health department said, well, maybe the
1931, they
water's
said.
not real good to swimming in. And so they cut that.
Now, why was that, though?
Supposedly the water was unhealthy, didn't meet standards. So we didn't have another outdoor swimming place until 1950 when the Legion Park swimming pool opened.
That's a long time.
Oh, I found the name. When Bird, in 1893, after nearly 2 decades as a quarryman, Bird decided to retire. He leased the business to Brayton
And care.
and Carey Quarry Company,
Uh-huh.
which operated until sometime in the early 1900s.
Okay.
Kind of interesting, too, when the Park District had big plans for not only Bird Park, but also Alpiner. They managed to get, in early 1929, they passed a $100,000 bond issue to develop those two properties. They had some pretty grandiose plans, too. The big quarry, actually there were 2 quarries there. There was the big quarry that we're familiar with, and just north of there would be north of Court Street where the band shell was a smaller quarry that's now been filled in. But the original plan on that was to turn the big quarry into a scenic lake with stone observation towers and a kind of a patio area and various other things. And then the other one, the small quarry, was going to be turned into a swimming beach.
So the small quarry would have been the Bird Park quarry, or the
the small quarry would have been where the Don Palzer band shell is.
That's the
where they hold
smaller one.
the evening concerts.
Okay.
The Park District later acquired additional property too. I think the area where the baseball field is.
Yes.
And then just north of there was a meat packing plant that had been out of business for years, and they acquired that as well. I don't know what the plans were for Alpiner, just that they were going to be developed. Unfortunately, none of this happened because of something called the Great Depression that happened in 1929.
I thought that's what you were going to say.
Yes.
But after that, they must not have revisited the plan, obviously, because it wasn't developed that way.
No, that's right.
You know.
So now, though, there's still a pretty good amount of development there. I mean, you have, of course, you don't have any swimming, but you have fishing in the quarry, and there's a number of activities in that same park. There's a playground for children and
and the band shell, as you said.
Band shell
There's
on the other side.
There's a boat launch.
Right, boat launch, and used to be a little zoo up there at one time. Back even in the 60s, it was kind of a sad little place, to be honest.
It's so funny you say that, because a lot of the people that I've come across that talk about the zoo, they make it sound like it was so cool and grand. But then when I hear from, yourself, Jack, that it was actually just kind of like this little small kind of like sad looking.
Yeah, they didn't have an awful lot of animals. They had just little cages.
Yeah. And it was what? It was like birds, different type of birds, right? Or what kind of animals did they have at the little zoo at Bird Park?
I vaguely remember I was really little. On the tip of my memory, remember it, but not enough to know that. But I did get a research request on it.
Okay.
We had a tiny bit in one of the old publications, but not enough to give a full detail. But that I do kind of remember in memory. But
there's no documentation of what kind of animals
Not
were
really.
in that little zoo.
There's some birds, and I think maybe small animals like foxes or
So pretty much
something.
animals that were local to the area.
Yeah, I think pretty much indigenous. They certainly didn't have any lions or tigers or bears.
yeah.
Right. Yeah, I would imagine not, or alligators or something like that.
Yeah.
And they used to have paddle boats.
Oh, yeah.
So I remember when we were young, we used to say to Dad,
In the quarry?
can we go
Mhm.
in the quarry? Can we go paddle boat? And so we would get in the middle, and then the three of us kids would kind of stop paddling.
Yeah.
And then Dad would have to
He'd
paddle
have
us
to
back.
pick up the pace. See, that would
Now,
be
that
fun.
was his story.
Yeah, right,
oh,
right.
really, Dad? Did that really happen?
Yeah. I guess I
Yeah.
just can't help but wonder, going back to the late 1920s, people are swimming in the quarry and the Bird Park quarry there, but then they're like, well, it's unhealthy. I guess I'm just wondering what the chemical was or the substance was in the water that was deemed unhealthy. Was it like a sulfur thing?
Well,
I think it might have been something like a pathogen of some sort.
Okay.
Something that would cause illness.
Yeah.
because there were outbreaks of infantile paralysis, and they were concerned that maybe the
polio.
water
Okay.
people or kids in there were
They would develop polio,
that
possibly?
kind of outbreak that they think that they just advised the state board health advised the park district that's probably not a good idea for kids to be swimming in this. So
Yeah.
today they have at the south end all of the equipment to play on.
Right.
yeah.
That's relatively new because when I was growing up, they had fire pits that you can have barbecue.
Mhm.
At least one that I remember at the north end. And then they had steel, old-fashioned swings and old steel slide and all that.
Mhm.
So when we would go there, we would start at that end, and then we would play our way down to the other end. And then there was a fire engine, an old, really old fire engine that you can climb on at the north end.
Oh, cool.
And then from there, we kind of went down
Yeah.
to the water, and they have a bathhouse there, which is now
That little office building.
that they use for different
the
things
drive,
now.
isn't
I think that was the bathhouse
Oh, okay. Mhm.
for
Yeah.
the swimming.
Okay.
And of
I was
course, there's
wondering-
also a building up on the Court Street end of things, up on the top area that is the headquarters for the Kankakee Valley Park District. It also has meeting rooms and various other amenities.
Yes. And I was wondering, did the park district build those, or were any of those like original from like the quarry days? Do you know?
Park District building, I'm quite sure they built it. I'm not sure about
Okay.
the little building that might have been the bathhouse, because that's quite an old building. It's small.
Yes. Yeah.
And
That possibly could have been, although I didn't find any in research, headquarters for the office for the quarry.
well, that could well be,
office.
the office building.
What else is within the history of Bird Park that's fascinating?
I don't know too much additional. Do you, Jorie?
Other than in photographs when it became a park, was if you looked at a photograph, say on the end where the Station Street entrance, and you saw a photograph of the entrance and you didn't know it was Bird Park, you would never guess that it was Bird Park because the scenery, the trees, and everything was so very
Thick?
different and much thicker.
Okay.
Same way with Mount Grove Cemetery. if you didn't know that was the entrance,
Well, it
you
was
wouldn't
there.
know.
It's hard to tell on an aerial.
Yeah.
You kind of miss
In
it, or
old photographs, it's
Mhm.
really interesting to see what property used to look
Mhm.
like. And this one definitely was one that had a major shift in what it looks like today.
yeah,
One important change, of course, is that when they built the Court Street Bridge and widened Court Street, they cut the park in half.
yes, they're right. It splits the park in half. Yeah.
Right, and there is an underpass. Of course, if you're driving through there and want to go over to the boat launch and so forth, there is an underpass. But it's really quite amazing if you look at the aerial pictures that how what a difference it made from the older pictures to the newer ones.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, the thing about Bird Park that I read through in the material is before our arts building, where our headquarters is for a museum, the park district offered the house on
Oh yeah,
at Bird Park for the location, because we had really no location. We had artifacts at the courthouse, but we didn't have a building, so they offered it. But there wasn't really a clear reason as to why they declined. But the park
probably no room for growth is my guess.
Probably,
Yeah, because obviously, the small memorial park, you got space to add on, which we know how many times has the museum been added on since 1948? What, 5?
5?
I think so. 5.
Yeah. So, it's quite a few. But yeah, if you would have ended up at the buildings at Bird Park, there's not really, where do you go?
Yeah, they made a little addition several years ago, but still,
Yeah, that would not have been sufficient.
Yeah, that's my guess is why they turned it down. But I didn't know that. I didn't know that was almost the home of the
the more I read through specific documents of what we have in our files on whatever topics, I'm always learning new things. So it's wonderful to know a lot, but it's also rewarding to learn, continue to learn different facts and figures and things like that. But I have a lot of wonderful memories of Bird Park.
Yeah. Me too.
Anybody who would like more information to look through things, you're welcome to give me a call or email me or to the museum general, and you can come in and look through materials, or if there's a specific fact I can look up for you, anything interested. And then a photograph, of course, if you want to look at old.
Jorie is a tremendous researcher, and anybody who needs information, she gets it.
Yeah, both of you are. Both of you are very good.
Absolutely. Happy to look through materials for people. People sometimes can't come in or call from distances.
Yes.
And then I search through materials and things.
I could get a small plug in for my column in the Journal every week also.
Yes. Yeah, Jack is still doing that.
My Looking Back column runs every Saturday, and each week try to come up with a good historical topic of something that maybe nobody knew about before, or at least a lot of people might not have known about it.
It's amazing how every week you just surprise us with something new. We've had this conversation before. It's like you think you're eventually going to run out, but you never do. There's always something
we surprise
new.
ourselves with
Jack Klasey's column in the Daily Journal is definitely worth checking out. So again, the Kankakee County Museum, I encourage anyone to go visit either campus, whether it's the South 8th Avenue location or the French Heritage Museum on Indiana Avenue. French Heritage Museum is only open on Saturdays, and that's seasonal. I don't think that's a year-round thing yet. And then Thursday, Friday, and Saturday is when the Kankakee County Museum is open.
Open from 9 to 5 each
9
day.
9 to 5, yeah. So, and again, KankakeeCountyMuseum.com, and also Instagram and Facebook at Kankakee County Museum. And thank you both to Jorie and Jack for being here once again.
Thank you.
And thank you for having us.
This river